We're at the Texas High School Coaches Association Coaching Clinic, and I'm sitting down with the head football coach at Klein Cain High School, which is north of Houston, James Clancy. And, Coach, it's great to be able to sit down with you here face-to-face and talk some ball.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And, Coach, congratulations on your honor, 40 under 40. I know that's a big thing here in Texas, so you're doing some things right.
I appreciate it. I was, very humbled to be recognized with such a good group of guys. And just like any head coach, anything good that happens is because I'm surrounded with great people and fortunate enough to have some good players and a lot of tremendous support.
We just sat down with Alan Hare, who is in his first year starting a program at Klein Chaparral High School. You're in year 5 of a program that you started from scratch. So we got to see what it's like right now before the first season. We get a perspective here of what does it look like down the road. So tell us a little bit about that experience for you and looking back at these past years to where you are now and the growth of the program.
There were times, so I was blessed to get the job first week of January 2017. So, what people don't realize is, when you're trying to decide on, personnel, I was an athletic department of one, for a couple of months. And, there was a temporary building outside of central office where they had housed, myself, our campus principal, and a couple of our assistant principals and counselor, and we literally had to work and discuss and try to shape things. And then you get into the challenge of staffing, and some of the things that you do before you even start thinking about X's and O's and all that kind of stuff is what type of culture do you want to try to cultivate, and you got to get the right people to make sure that they come in with the like mindset to establish that culture, and I think some of the most stressful things that you go through when you're opening a school and starting a program is the realization that you only get one chance to do it right. Obviously, we got a great community that's been, unbelievably supportive from us from day one, but it was a community that was going to have high expectations, and so with those expectations, we came in with a win now mindset that we were never going to play the victim role. We were never going to feel sorry for ourselves. I told the coaches when I brought them into interviews, I only know how to coach one way. I know how to coach at the varsity level, those expectations that we're going to put on our kids, because we don't want to give them a false sense of what the success may or may not be, and so we felt like having that mindset from the get-go was good, for everyone, because everybody understood how it was going to be consistently, and that the wins and the success and all that stuff was going to come, but we just had to trust the process, and I had used that phrase before and I had heard it before, but until you have to go in and you literally have to start on square one, day one, equipment box number one, you have a totally different perspective on what process is, and so started with 2 grades, and we added a grade, each year for the next couple of years. Had our first group of seniors in the fall of 2019. We're fortunate enough to get into the playoffs that year, and just thinking back on it, it seems like it went fast now, but there were some days where it didn't go very fast, and that's just kind of part of, when you think about grinding it out. That first group of seniors, they came to us as sophomores, so all of them had gone to high school at a different place, and so when you talk about building culture, you're taking, kids that had been, at good places, before as freshmen, but for whatever reason, their families decided that this was going to be the best course of action for them, and so then you had to, win them over, and then you had a group of freshmen that hadn't been to high school anywhere, and then so they were kind of a clean slate. So it was a really unique, challenge to try to bring all that together at once. That's when I just got to go back to, it's just so important when you get the right people around you to make sure that vision and that process is, reiterated throughout it. I think for me, the thing that I look back on and what allowed us to be successful is we have a principal that understood, the importance of school culture and how, coaches and faculty play such an important job, such an important role of getting that school culture disseminated. I mean, it's easy to put stuff up on the wall and sit in a big meeting and say, hey, this is, what we're about and this is what we're going to go do, but it's the people that you put in the trenches. They're the ones that really get it into the kids and get it out. So, we're, it goes quick. It's a lot of fun now,
right.
And it's neat because your expectations are your own.
Yes.
You know, and you create all those things. And, you know, obviously the world now, especially like in high school football, it's because of the internet and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. You know, you got preseason this and rankings this and whatever. And we've never really paid attention to a whole lot of that because we've always believed in if we set high expectations for ourselves, the rest of everything else is going to take care of it, you know. And so that's one thing I've really been proud of our kids and our coaches on. We've always, regardless of what outside factors or influences may say, we've always had high expectations for ourselves.
I think what's unique about a new program, too, is everything you're looking back on right now is your tradition.
Sure.
Your guys are anchored to that. They started that. There's probably something that's very special to those guys about being part of it. And now, as you mentioned, you know, 2019, your first year with seniors, so you got guys who are playing in college and guys who are coming back and, you know, for the first time, guys able to point at somebody and say, hey, you know, here's a guy who did it here before and has moved on to something else. Has taken his game to the next level.
Our homecoming games actually have people to come home to now. You know, it's just that was a challenge. You know, the first couple of years, we actually had to call them newcomings. You know, but it's neat. Like, you know, now we're getting into the younger brothers, you know, playing for us and things like that. And you know, the profession of coaching, no matter what level, in my opinion, is all about relationships, right? And so relationships that you have, you know, from head coach to your assistants, from your coaches to your players, player to player. But then, you know, and I don't want to sound cliche, but it's, you know, when you build a school and you open a school and you build a program and you talk about, you know, it's a 40-year deal, not a 4-year deal. I mean, like, you really have gone through some stuff with people when you're starting something because, like, you know, there's always the seeds of doubt. There's always, you know, trying to climb uphill in sandals, you know. And I think that's one of the things that our staff does a great job of is building those relationships with kids, building those relationships with our community members and our faculty. And we believe it's what makes, you know, our place special. You know, are we perfect? No, but, you know, I think the thing that our kids would all say is their coaches care about them. And I think that for us to be able to get those kids to buy in, they had to trust us, you know, because it would have been real easy to come in and say, well, you know, we're not supposed to have success. We're a young school, you know, we're going to take some time. And they really jumped in with both feet from the get-go and bought in.
When you look back at the things you did, especially early on, whether that was offense, defense, the way you handled the weight room, you know, in building your program, was there anything from more of that strategic or tactical standpoint that you felt we're doing it this way and it's going to give us an advantage?
Well, we're a up-tempo offense team. You know, we believe in doing everything at a high rate of speed. We believed that was going to give us a sense of urgency in everything that we did. You know, and just because we're an up-tempo team, you know, on offense didn't mean that we didn't have, you know, a fast-paced mentality, you know, in our other phases, you know, defense, special teams and things like that. But, you know, from the way that we checked roll, from the way that, like, you know, our kids jog down to athletic period every day. Like, we're always have a sense of urgency in everything that we do. And we feel like when you have a sense of urgency with everything, from how you check roll, from how you transition to the weight room, from how you transition to your meetings, if you have a sense of urgency, that's going to carry over into your performance. We believe in making sure that when it's football time, you know, whether it's athletic period or after school practice, off-season training, that, you know, it needs to be noticeably different mindset than what you go about, you know, day to day, you know, and I think that our kids have done a nice job of understanding that, and they know when they cross that line into the hallway and they got to jog down to athletic period, it's time to go get work done, you know. And I think that we did that from the very beginning, you know, even, you know, from when we just had 2 grades, you know, those really inherent things that we felt like these become the tradition. So, like, you know, when those first group became seniors, you know, that group of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors that were coming behind them, they just, you know, they started jogging down because that's what we did, you know. And I think those allowed us to have a foundation to when our talent caught up to our talent, our experience caught up to our expectations. That's when we were ready to go try and win.
So now, as that talent has caught up to the expectations, has there been anything in the approach that's evolved that maybe you're doing different now, or you feel like has been the next step in this progression?
For us, when we got that first big win and the kids felt the success and the light went off and they said, hey, we can do this. We can play with anybody. We can go. That allowed us in terms of accountability to have that reinforcement. Like, when you do things the right way, when you show up on time, when you participate, when you do well in class, when you treat people with respect, when you do all those things, good things are going to happen. Because that's literally what we've preached from day one is, if you take care of the details, okay, and you're detailed oriented and your habits are aligned with your goals, the success will take care of itself. Now, we play an extremely tough district against great opponents. We've been playing Division I and 6A in Texas, which, is an unbelievably hard bracket in Region 2. So, we know that we have to be at our best if we want to have a chance to, play for a long time, So I think that would be the biggest thing to look back on is, especially this group that we just graduated, I kept using the phrase, with them and within our community, like at our end-of-year banquet was, they were the class that taught us how to win. The first senior group got us to the postseason, but then this group came in and they said, hey, that was fun, but we want to continue to, go try and have success. And that is where, now you pass the torch of expectations on to the other group where they want to have, their own mark as a class, and I think that when you hit that stride and it's our job as coaches, like every year, every team's different. But I think if you have those, same fundamental basic things that you can pass from year to year where those kids understand those expectations, that's how they go out and be successful.
So you mentioned the sense of urgency and how that really became up-tempo on the offensive side of the ball on the field. Up-tempo in all you do, like you said, guys jogging to their athletic period, et cetera. I've seen, you could talk to anybody and they'll say, oh, we're, no huddle up-tempo. But I've also seen guys who really embrace what that is and think about that in much different ways. And, thinking of guys who've been on the podcast, Keith Bearfield, one that come to mind, or recently we aired a segment of a clinic with Glenn Ellerby, who's offensive line coach at Tennessee, and he was going through the details of how you coach an up-tempo offensive lineman. So in looking at that, what are some key coaching points and maybe something that's unique to how you guys think about things that need to be done if we're really truly going to be up-tempo and maximize this, and as soon as possible get that ball snapped after it gets spotted?
One of the things that I think that our staff has always done a great job of is, we go over to our junior highs and we try to, it's just amazing how kids know about football, but they don't know about football. Does that make sense? Like, you go over there and you ask them, hey, show me where the right hash is, show me where the left hash is, what's the field, what's the boundary, all those kind of things. They look at you like, you're speaking a foreign language. So we take some time, with our 8th graders and with our freshmen where we really kind of try to make sure that we're taking time to teach them about the game, right? So one of my most favorite drills to do with freshmen is, we call it our spot the ball drill, so we put the ball on the hash, the middle, the hash, about every 10 yards, and we line up in our base formation and we try to teach them to go as fast as they can. So we snap the ball, they hit their belly, they jump up, they run to the next ball, they get set, they do the same thing all the way down the field. And that's where they learn the sense of urgency and the communication. We're a very verbal team. All of our communication is, from a signal from the sideline to the quarterback to the receivers. And there's a lot of talking. Like I tell everybody, we're not a library. We don't have any secrets. We feel like we're able to go faster when we're verbal, and of course, we play in some venues and some crowds to where, sometimes verbal, we might run into some hiccups here or there, but, we have a system of signals that we go to. But, I would think to, I guess, more directly answer your question is I think learning the spacing and learning the pace, and how the pace is affected by each, position. You go from quarterback, they got to be vocal, they got to be mobile, they got to understand who they got to look at the sideline, they got to be able to communicate with their coach. Receivers, whether they're on the backside cutoff on a zone play or they just caught a slant route, for 12 yards, they got to know who the ball goes to, which official the ball goes to, how they get up, where their eyes go, and they got to, never be afraid to echo the call. I mean, there's one thing that'll just get me going in practice is if we just, all of a sudden we're not echoing calls. And then, like, from the running back, they may, sometimes they have one of the harder jobs because, they carry the ball, they got to find it, and they got to figure out what side to line up on and all those things. They have a little bit more to process sometimes. But for us, the two most important people for tempo is our center and our quarterback. Mm-hmm. We've always been big believers that the center is really the one that controls the tempo. So you got to have somebody with some wits about them, that's got some personality and they're able to understand, like, hey, the ball's, finished outside the hash, the ball's going to be on the left hash, so they go there because, like, he's the bell cow, right? So all the other linemen are going to go with him, and so, when we draft our guys and we go through all that, that's one of the things that I've always put a lot of stock into. Is one of the first people off the board is who's going to be our center, because they control so much in what we do. So I think those are the two biggest things, understanding spacing, understanding the pace, and then how to educate, as a position coach, how do you educate your guys on how you contribute to that pace? And you got to take, pride in it. Like, you can't have your position or your, we call them units at our school, but you can't have your unit being the one that's slowing the pace down, right. And so then it just, kind of, it becomes inherited, to see our JVs go out there and no huddle people and tempo people, our freshmen, we think that that's a pretty cool deal, because, that takes, time and investment to get those guys going, but they're going to end up having to be varsity guys for us someday.
Yeah, exactly. In looking at this time of year, taking this into camp, right, and getting your guys ready for the season. I'm sure you've done a lot of work in the summer and spring and in your athletic periods, et cetera, but now it takes a new focus as the new season is right there on the horizon. Anything different you take in your approach to how you're getting reps with first team, second team, approach to what your practice periods look like, et cetera?
We graduated, quite a bit, from our team last year. And so this past, spring practice was really important for us. With the new UIL rules for us in Texas to be able to do an hour of football, SSI each day, it's allowed us to really kind of look at some different combinations of players and things, that you would love to have that extra time. As you used to be getting into preseason, but man, if I'd really had some extra opportunities to work this stuff out, I would know going into it. So we feel like we can be better prepared to actually start practicing when August comes, because we've been able to tweak some things and mess around with some different personnel combinations. I think that the ability for us to focus on fundamentals and teaching, we're able to teach now more than we've ever been before. 3 or 4 years ago, before we started doing the sport-specific instruction stuff, you had 24 workouts. It could just be strength conditioning. There was no football. So I think for a lot of things, like if you're a new coach coming into a school, or, if you're a kid that's transitioning from freshman to varsity or JV to varsity, we get to teach now more than we ever have before. And so that's really where a lot of our approach is right now, is trying to teach and install some really basic fundamental things, so where when practice one comes, we can go out and we can just practice.
In looking at the other side of the ball, right, a lot of times if you're not well aligned between we are going to move super fast on offense, this is how we do things, and making sure that the defense can handle that, you could still play complementary football with it. What things do you guys do from that standpoint to ensure that this is complementary football? The way we do things here is fine because we can do this over here on the defensive side.
I think, and I probably should have said this earlier, I think the most important key to being a successful tempo team is having coordinators that both understand what the philosophy is and believing in the philosophy. And, our defense coordinator, Coach Fletcher, does a great job of buying into the philosophy for our program, and it was a deal that, when we made this decision that this is how our program was going to be, it was everybody contributed to that decision, because it'd be real easy, especially in practice, because there's not officials there and the ball gets spotted at an extremely fast pace because we're trying to get reps and all those things. It'd be really easy to, for kids to, get below the line and not, think that, this is fair or whatever. We don't have a no excuse, mentality, and those kids, do a great job of getting lined up, and we know that we don't have, a lot of time in between. And it shows up in a game. Like, we try to make our practice harder than what a game is. Our defense does a great job of getting our calls in, and just like, I remember, I think it was at this actual convention a few years ago, Kirby Smart, when I think he had just gotten to Georgia, had talked about, how they had to change some of their vernacular and some of their calls to be able to get stuff in faster. And,
right.
One thing means a bunch of different, stuff for everybody. And we've gone to some things like that where our kids are able to play faster, and again, it all just kind of goes down again to, if you're vertically aligned with, what you're going to ask your kids to do on a daily basis, then your install and your schemes and how you communicate them, because some people could have a West Coast, 12-word, thing. Well, that's great. Like, if you got time to do it, but we have 2 words or 1 word plays because we're trying to go fast, so it all has to match up. And so I think that was one thing our defensive staff has done a great job of, is coaching our kids to think when they're tired, to think when things are going fast, and be able to recognize, now, like, for us, like, we get in a 3-by-1 formation, and the next thing we could be in 2-back nub because we don't sub, and so for our kids to be able to process and think quickly, is something that we practice all the time. One of the things that we do when we don't have pads on in the preseason is we have a formation rec period, because, like, you can't go against each other. Have pads on, so we got to get something out of it. So one of my favorite things to do is to get the group 1 out there and go all the way down the field and do your checks and get in and out, make sure everybody's aligned right, and make the most of that time. And so our staff has done a really good job of that.
And I think, to your point, when you are up tempo, you will find, because we did a study on this years ago, I really wanted to know how much time is there really between when a play ends and to when that ball's set and you could go again. And we found that, and this was Division III college, our officials, and we'd have to go back, and we were watching the broadcast that everybody saved, college is streaming it, and it was 11 seconds, right? And 11 seconds compared to what you do in practice seems like an eternity.
Sure.
So it does slow down in a lot of ways if you ingrain that in your players' heads, that ball is spotted way faster in practice.
Yeah, our defensive guys can't wait for scrimmage day when the officials are there, And I get, and it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, what the monster that you've created, but at the same time, like, we could go out on a bad weather day and practice in the athletic period. If we're getting bad weather in the afternoon, and we can get 65 to 70 plays, in athletic period, and teach and coach off film after school with our kids, and so that all just kind of goes back to mindset and philosophy,
right.
And we have the capability to do that, and we think that allows us to never be in a situation to where our kids aren't going to have an opportunity to go out and compete.
You mentioned that you don't change personnel, but you do get into different types of groupings that typically would demand a personnel change. So it's a great strategy. I know it provides huge advantages. Thinking back to when we first went to, that kind of up tempo, when we were changing personnel, the officials weren't going and standing over the ball. I mean, it was beautiful. It's beautiful. But now you do that, and your guys standing around and the defense is looking at you. So it is an advantage to be able to move those guys around. But what things do you do, or what do you have to account for from a practice standpoint in getting these guys ready to be able to move around and have those different skill sets, right? The skill set that a guy who's in the slot is certainly going to be a lot different than things now that you add to him as he's in the backfield.
I think it kind of goes back to, at least for us, on staff structure. We've subscribed to the model of having a tight ends H's coach, which for us could be, a guy with, attached for a 3 surface look, with his hand in the ground, or he could be in, a Y off, wing position, or he could be, the sniffer, like in a twins look, or for us, like, we like the offset pistol look, so he could be, old traditional, fullback look. Pre-practice, I'm a big pre-practice person. We spend a lot of time pre-practice to where, let's say, if a young man is a tight end guy, so he gets his ball skill work and pat and go, jugs time before practice, and then he goes for individual with the O-line. And then we come to group. He comes, the tight end coach brings him over to with the backs and the quarterbacks, and we do, exchanges where if we got to work on split flow and he's got to cap the backside and work on bootleg stuff. Like it just, we call him the traveling man. I mean, like he just kind of goes through the practice. Then when we start coming together, for inside and for inside run and team run and stuff, like then, we're all together. But I think you got to understand, because we segment our practices by, field zone days, and so where he's got to travel that day is the work that he's got to get in and the stuff that we're going to run in that field zone, and so when we script our stuff, it's just up to the coach to kind of go in and say, okay, well, we need to make sure that we get these looks in our groups because we're going to see it in inside and we're going to see it in teams, so we got to make sure we get that taught, before we come down there. And it's been good. I mean, like, we've had years where we've had to sub a little bit more than we've liked, but I mean, we feel like we have been most effective when we do not have to sub. It just allows us to be, really multiple and allows us to play at a really fast pace. And we feel like it really gives the defense a hard time. And that guy that's the tight end now might be a slot, now might be, in the backfield and move around. And, if they try to match situations like, short yardage, if they bring in a heavy personnel, or if they, bring in big people on goal line or whatever, it gives us an advantage for us not to have to sub, and we can get the ball snapped and get the play executed.
From an Uptempo standpoint, you guys are able to get a lot of reps in practice, which helps execution, right? That definitely is something directly correlated to repetitions. I remember having a conversation with a kid I coached when he was in 4th through 8th grade, David Ragone, who's now the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, and at the time I believe he was coach for the Bears. And he was talking about a study they did on I can't recall the team. It might have been the Patriots, but, a team that was at the NFL level doing more of the up-tempo stuff. And the one thing he pointed out is they were playing like a game more than everybody else. So load management becomes important, and I'm sure you look at those types of things, especially as you're looking at those different phases of the season. Absolutely. And getting to the playoffs, and you certainly want to have gas in the tank there. So are there any considerations of how you do things as the season goes on with the amount of reps? I'm sure you're not going to slow the tempo down because that's not who you are, but how do you handle the reps?
Most definitely. I mean, and I think it kind of goes into, like I know last year, we felt like we had a really good team, and we were an experienced team, and so from that standpoint, we got to, just the way the schedule fell, we had a 7-team district and we drew week 11 as our bye. So we knew that we were going to have to go 10 games in a row, before we were going to get an open week. So our coaches and our staff did a really good job of load management, when we got to certain points to where, if we felt like, we could do some stuff during the period and then shorten it after school, like, we did that. Once we got into, probably about, the 5th or 6th game, we started going, only one day a full, a week. But you communicate. Like, I'm a big believer in always communicating, especially this day and age with kids. This is why we're doing this, so we can be ready for this. So you got to make sure that we got to take this serious, or else we're going to miss an opportunity. Like, this is why we're doing this. And so yeah. So the closer you get to the playoffs, like we scale back time. We always, as a tempo team, put more value on team reps. So we shave off a little individual, shave off some group. Maybe only go one series of inside run versus the defense just to get, speed of the game type stuff. But we're big believers on, the more team reps that we can get, the more we have to coach off of and correct, especially towards the end of the year, the better prepared our kids are going to be.
Absolutely. And for those teams out there, you guys made it a point. We're going to do this because we feel it's an advantage. And I know there's a lot of coaches out there, new teams, new programs they're coaching for the first time, maybe going with a strategy like that. What recommendations do you have, or what tips do you have for people who are doing it for the first time you think that maybe could help them?
I just think in terms of tempo, like you gotta understand that when you decide to be a tempo team, it's not just in your team segment and practice. Like, I'll go back to kind of what I said, like, it's overall like program philosophy, right? And, there'll be some times of frustration to where, like, especially like if you were transitioning from an under center team to a gun team, like you gotta, center's got to go down, whatever your call system is, the ID stuff, and make sure the snap's good and all those things. Like, there's some growing pains with it, but like, to your point earlier, like, you feel like you've played an extra game, you've gotten extra practices, like for example, last year, week 4, we had a hurricane barreling down on the Houston area, so they canceled school for the next day because you had precautions. Well, we only had 1 day of practice that week, but we knew with how we practiced and we went against things that we were going to get a solid enough amount of reps that we were going to be able to be functional for the game. But like at the same time, like we knew that however we went about our business, the kids are going to have to be able to have that sense of urgency to get this stuff done because we didn't know what was getting ready to happen. Right. This was going to be our only practice, and so our kids and our coaches handled it, really well. But it just goes back to like, if you're doing it for the first time, you got to make sure you make the commitment to do it in all things in your program. And as a coach, you can't expect the switch to just get flipped. Like all of a sudden, okay, now we're in team and now we're going really fast. And then, the kids, if that sense of urgency's been built up from individual to group and then now into team, then they know that they can turn it up a notch, go from gear 3 to gear 4. It's hard to go from gear 1 to gear 4, and so I think that would be the thing is to make sure you're reiterating tempo in all things, and then understand that just like with anything else, it's just going to get better with reps. So your gun snaps will get better with reps. Your ball skills. I remember my first head coaching job, that we transitioned from an under center, more pro style offense to, the spread and throwing, quick game and screens and all that kind of stuff. And then the first, couple, weeks of spring, I was just like, oh my goodness, but we just kept going and just kept repping and kept, don't ever get bored with details. Right. When we do our perfect drill and our pat and go stuff, in pre-practice, like we do the same drills in pre-practice in August, and we'll do the same drills in November. I think having those things that that you're getting your kids to touch footballs, to work on those skills, throughout the year. It's amazing how many throws a quarterback can make and how many balls a kid touches, in pre-practice from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and the improvement that you see, especially with your young guy.
Yeah, absolutely. The perfect drill. I had Tony Franklin on some time back talking about the perfect drill. It was an incredible explanation of the play. I'll link that one in the show notes. That's definitely something memorable to me.
Tony's been huge for me and in my career, and I learned it from him. And yeah, I mean, it's a staple, and it's something that our junior highs, tell our junior high guys they got to do it. Our freshmen do it. I mean, like it is, and it's it's a great off-season thing, when you're starting to introduce ball skills, But it is definitely something that I, as the head coach, get pretty fired up to coach. It's when I get to really interact with the players and stuff in pre-practice and all that, and we put a big point of emphasis on it.
Yeah, the coaching side too. If someone's going to this for the first time, they haven't done it before, so there is an adjustment in coaching in an up-tempo environment as well. I don't believe, I'm just going to coach it on the film. I heard that, beginning a tempo era. Oh, we just coach it off film. I don't think those guys did. I think certainly they're going to get more off of film because you always have to be coaching. You always have to be giving feedback. So any advice on that side of things for a coach, to be able to coach in an up-tempo environment?
I use the phrase, I live it with the players. Like I live during the play. Like, I talk to them about, hey, widen out your split. All right, hey, ball's coming to you. Like, I live the play with them, and I coach as they're transitioning to the next play. There's no stop, everybody listen. I try to communicate as I go and coach as I go, so the kids are getting coached as they're going on to the next play, and then I reiterate those points when we do get to come back and watch the film. One of the things our staff does a great job is, Huddle allows us to go in and type comments and stuff in, on the video, and we're able to send our players out playlists and things like that with notes on them. And those messages always need to be consistent from what you're saying in practice to what you're saying in those notes. But that is definitely something that, you got to coach on the run. you know, and it's very similar like to a game. Like you're trying to make an adjustment, like tell somebody to widen out or whatever, and there's really no difference in how we coach and approach stuff in practice than how we do a game, because we're constantly moving, constantly telling our kids, you know, what to do and how to go about doing things. So I think that'd be the biggest adjustment for some people, because like, you know, they want to stop and they want to talk to their guy about a step or, you know, whatever. And it's just like, hey, coach, you got to tell him, you know, he's got to do half an inch more and you got to get him going, you know. And so I think that's the biggest adjustment for a coach that's never been in it. The best piece of advice that I could give a staff if they'd never done it before and now they're going to it is go watch somebody practice. Yeah. Don't watch game film. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, you can get some ideas off of game film, but I'm talking about go watch a tempo program practice, from how they come out to stretch to how they do pre-practice to how they transition to drills. Then you kind of get the whole idea of how it works, because you can't see that on film, you know, but once you see the moving parts and the inner workings of it, then you're like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great advice. Well, Coach, you've shared a lot of great stuff here, certainly on the spread and in building a program. You look at all you do as a coach, what's the one thing you could point to say, you know what, this really gives my team the winning edge?
I just believe in you know, trying to be tough. You know, I think one of the biggest things that you could say that would get my Irish up is if you said we're a spread offense that's finesse. You know, I think that we live in a time where toughness is a rare commodity. You know, and I think, you know, if you teach a kid how to be tough, he's going to be successful in life. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, I think one of the biggest things that football teaches us is how to get back up when we get knocked down, right? And so I think that for us as coaches, you know, if we're able to instill that in our players, how to be tough and how to keep getting up and keep answering the bell, they're going to go out and they're going to be successful in life. So I think that that's one thing that, you know, doesn't take any talent to be tough. That's what I tell our kids, you know, and so I would say that would be one thing that, you know, we may not always be the most talented, but I would, you know, I'd be very disappointed if our opponents didn't think that we had a bunch of tough kids and we were a tough team, you know.
Coach, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Coach J Clancy, and then my email for Klein ISD email is jclancy1@kleinisd.net, and you know, you can hit me up there. We always love talk football. Always, you know, love, you know, the Zoom stuff has changed the football world. You know, sharing ideas and everything. You know, we don't got all the answers, but you know, we feel like you know, we can always improve and get better, and like sharing ideas with people. So.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time out here to spend some time sitting down and talking ball with me and sharing that with our listeners. And best of luck to you and your team in 2022.
All right, Keith. Thank you very much, man.